1957. Under public pressure, General Motors made a public vow. Factory-backed motorsports are forbidden. No support for racing. But what if this ban was just a clever disguise? A facade behind which Detroit's most audacious and powerful engine was born. The enigmatic mystery engine? Its triumph at Daytona in '63 was deafening, but it cost the engine its life. The corporation ordered hundreds of units to be destroyed. Symbolic, cruel. But then how, just 2 years later, did the legendary Big Block 396 appear? An engine suspiciously similar to the destroyed Mark II, but with deliberately underrated horsepower and an official pedigree. Was this a genuine ban or a brilliant strategy? This is the story of how restrictions only fueled a bold rebellion that forever changed the world of speed. Immerse yourself in the saga of how Detroit's most powerful force learned to fly under the radar. In an era when the roar of engines was the nation's anthem and speed was the measure of progress, the unthinkable happened. The golden age of American racing, which seemed destined to last forever, was overshadowed by a corporate edict. 1957. Not a date, but a sentence. The Automobile Manufacturers Association, or AMA, delivered its verdict. Factory support for motorsports was banned. Voluntary, they called it. A sweet word that concealed an iron fist, ready to crush any thirst for speed. General Motors, the titan of the industry, publicly nodded, agreeing to play by the new rules. But within the walls of Detroit, in the hearts of engineers, they already knew. Voluntary did not mean sincere. It was an act of political maneuvering, an attempt to appease the public and regulators who viewed auto racing as dangerous madness, a blood sport unworthy of support from respectable corporations. However, while some were signing papers, others were already searching for loopholes, for cracks in this wall of prohibitions that could restore their lost power. Just a few years later, in the early '60s, this tension became unbearable, almost palpable. Relentless competitors were attacking from the flanks. Ford, with its aggressive ambitions to dominate racing, and Chrysler, rolling out its monstrous Hemi V8s, were breathing down their necks, snatching podiums and headlines. Every new speed record, every victory on the track secured by rivals, felt like a gut punch to the engineers at Chevrolet. The heart of the company, obsessed with performance, demanded a response, demanded revenge. It screamed, "We can't stand by while our competitors triumph." But GM's official ban remained steadfast, like a granite monolith against which all overt initiatives shattered. And then, the inevitable happened. In the shadow of the bans, far from the prying eyes of corporate oversight, a whisper of speed was born, a project that could change everything. A handful of engineers, possessed by one audacious idea to create a V8 engine capable of eclipsing all competitors, began their secret mission. This wasn't just an engine. It was a challenge to the system, an act of defiance embodied in metal and fire. A symbol of hope for those who believed that engineering and the passion for speed could not be silenced by paper prohibitions. Rumors of the project crept through Detroit like an electric current, passed from mouth to mouth in dimly lit garages and behind the scenes at racetracks. The mystery engine, they called it. Or, as it later became known, the Mark II Big Block. The name itself was shrouded in secrecy. It was rumored to have been developed not in the bright, easily monitored workshops of the main building, but in remote, dusty hangars, hidden behind sturdy gates and walls, far from prying eyes, and more importantly, from the attention of GM's top management. The work was done in the evenings, under the cover of night, when most employees had already gone home and silence reigned in the corridors. Every blueprint, every part was kept under the strictest secrecy. The engineers knew they were playing with fire, risking their careers and reputations by violating a direct corporate directive. But the thirst for speed, the desire to prove their own superiority, was stronger than any fear or official decree. They were not just mechanics. They were conspirators, visionaries, dreamers who believed that the future of speed could not be constrained by the chains of corporate dictate. The tension grew with each passing day. On one side, the strict, all-encompassing ban from General Motors on any involvement in racing, threatening serious consequences for any deviation. On the other, unbridled engineering ingenuity, spurred on by the ambitions of competitors and an internal, almost primal drive to win. It was a battle of ideologies, a conflict between reason and heart. What would happen when this mystery engine, born in shadow and secrecy, finally broke free to reveal its true potential? Would it rewrite the rules of the game, or would it face inevitable destruction under the weight of corporate restrictions? The answer was near, ready to explode on America's most legendary track, forever changing automotive history and laying the foundation for a legend that would live for decades. February 1963. The atmosphere at the Daytona 500 was electrified with the anticipation of speed. Thousands of fans filled the stands, unaware that they were about to witness not just a race, but a bold statement, a torrent of fire and metal that would shake the foundations of motorsport. Among the familiar silhouettes on pit lane, they appeared. A few Chevrolet Impalas, ordinary in appearance, but drawing attention. Something in their stance, their readiness, betrayed a hidden power. These cars were like phantoms, arriving from the shadows of corporate bans. Beneath their hoods lurked a beast that only a select few had whispered about. The very same mystery engine, or Mark II big block, born in the shadow of the corporate ban, was now set to step into the light. Not for an official victory, but for a demonstration of raw, almost defiant superiority. When the starting flag dropped, the world of motorsport held its breath. The Impalas didn't just drive, they flew. Their roar was different, deeper, more aggressive than anyone else's on the track. It seemed as if every piston was singing a song of defiance. 427 cubic inches of pure, untamed flame, hidden from prying eyes, suddenly broke free. These machines, piloted by legends like Johnny Rutherford and Junior Johnson, demonstrated astonishing speed. They overtook renowned competitors as if they were standing still. With every lap, they conquered the track, their rivals, and the very logic of what was considered possible in an era of voluntary restrictions. Their outstanding potential was obvious. They didn't just participate, they dominated, setting times that inspired not only admiration, but also a nervous tremor in their competitors. The spectators, the commentators, the rival drivers, everyone was in shock. This was not just a performance, it was a revelation. Unexpected, bold, almost audacious. An engine that, by all rights, should not have existed, had now loudly announced its arrival, shifting the balance of power in the very heart of motorsport. It instantly changed the game, demonstrating a level of power and innovation capable of turning the racing world upside down. But the triumph was as fleeting as a flash of lightning. Rumor has it that this deafening, yet completely unsanctioned success was the final straw for Detroit. The corporate ban, until then riddled with cracks thanks to the dedicated work of engineers in secret hangars, became an impenetrable wall. General Motors was forced to react, officially, harshly, without compromise. Immediately after Daytona, GM issued a stern statement, a complete and unconditional withdrawal from all forms of motorsport. And the fate of most of the mystery engines? Confiscation. Destruction. That was the official word. Entire batches of these advanced, powerful engines were, according to management, sent to the scrap heap of history, crushed under the weight of corporate rules. But history whispers otherwise. Rumors persist that not all of these forbidden hearts were lost to oblivion. Some of them, like a phoenix from the ashes, were hidden away, saved by dedicated engineers and racers who could not let such engineering prowess simply disappear. They were lost in the depths of warehouses or fell into the hands of private teams, becoming the seeds for future developments and legends. And it was there, in the shadows where the corporate eye could not reach, that the spirit of defiance born on the Daytona track lived on. It became a symbol that the passion for speed cannot be destroyed. It merely changes its form, only to one day burst forth again, even more powerful and unstoppable. The thunder of victory at Daytona echoed through Detroit, but it was not a sound of celebration. It was a deafening blow, heralding an imminent storm. In the corporate corridors of General Motors, a spirit of unease, bordering on fury, lingered. For too long, the voluntary ban from the Automobile Manufacturers Association of 1957, which GM had joined, was treated more as a recommendation than a law. Its cracks, exploited by enthusiasts, allowed engineers to secretly conceive audacious projects like the mystery engine in remote hangars after hours. But now that this engineering masterpiece had loudly announced itself on the legendary track, the game was over. The unofficial triumph was the last straw. For GM's top management, alarmed by the intense public scrutiny and pressure from competitors like Ford and Chrysler, this was not just a violation of the rules, it was an act of open defiance, a rebellion, and rebellion had a price. Until then, the corporate ban had been like an old, tattered net through which the boldest could slip. Now, it transformed into a steel cage intended to crush any initiative that went against official policy. The consequences were swift. Immediately after the race, GM issued a statement that shook the motorsport world to its core, a complete and unconditional withdrawal from all forms of racing. This wasn't just an announcement, it was a sentence, and not just for racing. The majority of those very mystery engines, whose 427 cubic inches had sliced through the air at Daytona, were declared outlawed. Eyewitnesses from those days still recall trucks hauling away entire batches of brand new, ultra-powerful engines. The official story was confiscation and subsequent destruction. Hundreds, if not thousands, of cutting-edge engines were sent to the scrap heap of history, crushed under the weight of corporate rules, a symbolic sacrifice meant to prove that the spirit of rebellion had been suppressed, once and for all. But, as is often the case, history abhors a vacuum. Where official statements fall silent, rumors begin to whisper. Not all of these forbidden hearts were lost to oblivion. It is said that dedicated engineers and racers who could not accept such barbarism saved some units. They were lost in the depths of warehouses, hidden in garages, or found their way into the hands of private teams, becoming the seeds for future legends. These survivors were not just pieces of iron. They became beacons of resistance, living proof that the passion for speed cannot be eradicated by a top-down decree. It was in this shadow, beyond the reach of the corporate eye, that the spirit of defiance born on the Daytona track lived on. The core developments and ideas of the Mark II, that forbidden engine, did not vanish without a trace. They were preserved, modified, and gave birth to a new era. Thus, the production big block Mark IV engine was born, and its first representative was the monstrous 396 cubic inch beast. In 1965, the world officially saw it for the first time. The Chevrolet Big Block 396, known by its codename L78, debuted in iconic models like the Chevelle SS and the Corvette. The claimed horsepower? A mere 425. But rumors quickly spread through Detroit. This was just a corporate ploy. It was widely believed that the true power of the L78 was intentionally underrated. Why? To adhere to GM's own internal rules, avoid high insurance premiums, and most importantly, divert attention from its direct racing ancestry. In reality, this beast produced well over 450 horsepower, hiding its true strength behind the facade of a respectable road car. That same year, 1965, brought another vivid example of the delicate dance with corporate bans, the limited edition Chevelle Z16 SS 396. In essence, it was a street-legal race car. This became one of the clearest indications that the ban was more of a public spectacle than an absolute reality. Meanwhile, figures like Zora Arkus Duntov, the legendary chief engineer of the Corvette, actively used his influence and connections, despite all prohibitions, to provide unofficial support to private race teams and dealers. He was the gray eminence of GM's racing program, keeping the flame of competition alive. Dealerships like Yenko Chevrolet and Baldwin Motion quickly took up the banner, creating their own quasi-factory dealer racing programs. They modified Chevrolet cars, installing even more powerful versions of the big blocks, providing racers with what the factory itself could not openly offer. Motorsport history asserts GM's ban on racing was merely a theatrical performance for the public and corporate lawyers. The internal resistance and informal support for racing never truly ceased. They just changed form, becoming more cunning and sophisticated. It is thanks to this spirit of defiance that Chevrolet's big block engines, including the legendary 396, became icons. Despite the lack of official factory support, they achieved countless victories in drag racing and on road courses. Their robust construction and immense potential for tuning made them perennial champions. The story of the Forbidden Engine showed that a true passion for speed will always find a way, even if it has to go through fire and water, through bans and destruction, only to one day burst forth again, even more powerful and unstoppable. A resounding sentence had been passed, the doors of corporate hangars had slammed shut, and under immense pressure, the heart of Chevrolet's racing ambitions seemed to have vanished forever. The mystery engine, that 427 cubic inch monster that roared at Daytona, was declared an outlaw. Hundreds, if not thousands, of advanced engines were turned into scrap metal, becoming a symbol of surrender to corporate bans. But history, my friends, abhors a vacuum. And under the heaviest pressure, a crack will always be found for the flame to seep through. It was in this suffocating atmosphere of total prohibition, amidst the wreckage of shattered hopes, that a spark of resistance was ignited. Officially, the legacy of the mystery engine was destroyed. But unofficially, rumors crept through the corridors of Detroit. Stories of an incredible salvation passed from mouth to mouth. It is said that not all of these burning hearts met the blade. Some of them were too precious, too important, to simply disappear. The engineers, racers, and mechanics dedicated to the cause of speed, people for whom the roar of an engine was music and victory was a religion, could not allow such barbarism. Imagine, after the workday, when the factory gates were closed and the watchful eyes of management were turned elsewhere, a secret life began to stir. In the dim light of remote warehouses, under the cover of old tarps and crates, more than just engines were hidden. There were blueprints, notes, and the unique developments of the Mark II. that engineering masterpiece whose life was so abruptly cut short. These hidden caches became more than just shelters for metal. They became incubators for future ideas. Those very lost engines that miraculously escaped destruction now served as living textbooks, models for further, even bolder experiments. Every salvaged crankcase, every cylinder head, every carefully preserved sketch, all of it was gold dust from which a new legend was to be forged. The task was monumental. How to take a racing engine, created with no regard for limitations, and turn it into a production model that could meet the demands of everyday use without losing its beastly essence? Engineers secretly worked on adapting the most audacious solutions from the Mark II. They studied its unique valve geometry, the efficiency of its combustion chambers, and the incredible strength of its block. Every element was rethought to survive in a world where speed had to be not only ferocious, but also controllable, where power had to be combined with reliability. This was a true engineering ballet in the shadows. The principles laid down in the forbidden Mark II were now being transferred to a completely new platform. Dimensions were changed, materials were optimized, and production processes were adapted. This was not mere copying. It was a rebirth through transformation. They were building a bridge between what was forbidden and what was to become reality, carefully concealing its origins. After all, the official story had to be that this was a completely new engine, a clean slate, created from scratch. And so, 2 years after that fateful decision of a total ban, from this shadow, from this secret labor, from this rebellious spirit, a phoenix arose. In 1965, the world saw it, but the world did not know its true origin. It was the big block Mark IV, a production engine carrying the genes of its forbidden ancestor. And its first, most brilliant representative was the legendary 396 cubic inch monster. This was not just a new engine, it was living proof that the passion for speed cannot be stifled by bureaucracy. It was the echo of something that never dies, the spirit of Chevrolet, the spirit of racing, the spirit that will always find a way to break through any prohibition. The world saw it, but the world did not know its true origin. It had no idea that the 396 cubic inch monster, born in the shadow of a ban, was just the first, carefully disguised wave of a tsunami. In 1965, Chevrolet officially introduced it to the world under the code name L78. Not just anywhere, but in its most iconic high-performance models, the legendary Chevelle SS and the sleek, predatory Chevrolet Corvette. Acclaimed 425 horsepower. Impressive, wasn't it? But that was just the tip of the iceberg. A carefully calculated lie. It was a sophisticated game played in the back rooms of Detroit. General Motors, still bound by the voluntary ban from the Automobile Manufacturers Association, AMA, of 1957, and its own tightened rules after the fateful decision to withdraw from racing, could not openly sell purebred racing engines. It could not let the public, and especially the insurance companies, know how wild this big block really was. 425 official horses. That was a code. A silent signal to the initiated. Rumors swirled that the true output of the L78, measured on dynos, easily exceeded 450, even 470 horses. Underrating the power was a multi-layered strategy, maintaining corporate decency, lowering exorbitant insurance premiums for buyers, and of course, diverting attention from its true, fiery racing lineage inherited from the mystery engine. But if the numbers were a mask, there was also a car that was the embodiment of this disguise in its purest form. In that same year, 1965, the Chevelle Z16 SS 396 appeared. This was not just a powerful Chevelle, it was, in essence, a street-legal race car, a limited edition, each one proclaiming its unambiguous purpose: a reinforced chassis, special brakes, the massive 396 engine under the hood. It was all done for one reason: to dominate the road, and just as importantly, the track, albeit under the guise of a production car. The Z16 was a challenge thrown by the system at itself, a clear demonstration that even under the strictest corporate oversight, the spirit of speed would always find a loophole. It was the forbidden engine, back on the market, but now with an official pedigree and a smile that hid a steel-toothed grin. While engineers masterfully juggled numbers and dealers sold civilian monsters, figures like Zora Arkus Duntov, the legendary chief engineer of the Corvette, were not idle. Persistent rumors claimed that, despite the ban, he acted as a gray eminence, secretly using his influence and connections to provide unofficial support to private race teams and dealers, effectively serving as the unofficial coordinator of GM's racing program. The ban existed, but it was more of a facade, behind which a secret war for dominance continued. General Motors hadn't so much given up on racing as it had learned to do it covertly, turning its production lines into workshops for legal loopholes. And this forbidden, then resurrected, Big Block 396 was living proof. It was a phoenix that had learned to fly under the radar. But this phoenix, which had learned to fly under the radar, didn't appear out of nowhere. Its flight was made possible by an invisible network spread across the most hidden corners of Detroit. While General Motors' top management publicly swore allegiance to the voluntary ban, a completely different life was simmering beneath this facade. The passion for speed, driven underground, had merely taken on a new, more sophisticated form. And this secret war had its generals and its loyal soldiers. We have already briefly mentioned Zora Arkus Duntov, the legendary chief engineer of the Corvette, but his role extended far beyond that of a mere engineer. Duntov was not just a gray eminence. He was a true alchemist of speed, capable of turning corporate restrictions into new opportunities. He was a living legend, obsessed with racing, who simply could not accept that his masterpieces would gather dust in showrooms instead of tearing up the asphalt of racetracks. Persistent rumors suggested that he, like an unofficial coordinator, actively used every connection, every lever of influence within GM's walls to provide unofficial support to those who dared to defy the ban. Imagine secret shipments of parts, supposedly for research purposes, technical consultations that sounded like a friendly chat over a cup of coffee, or even, accidentally, lost blueprints that would mysteriously appear on the desks of private race teams. Duntov, without hesitation, pushed his engineers and even production lines to create components that were never supposed to see a racetrack, but invariably ended up there. His influence was so great that even the official destruction of the mystery engine after that fateful Daytona race in 1963 might not have been as total as it was portrayed. Who knows how many of those lost engines or their components ended up in the garages of the right people, becoming the basis for future victories. This shadow support, initiated by figures like Duntov, found its embodiment in iconic dealerships. They became true bastions of the rebellion, the forward outposts of this unofficial racing program. Among them, two names stood out, synonymous with uncompromising power and fearlessness: Yenko Chevrolet and Baldwin Motion. These dealers didn't just sell cars, they remade them. Take Yenko Chevrolet. Don Yenko, the owner of the Pennsylvania dealership, was an avid racer himself and understood perfectly what it took to win. He would take seemingly ordinary production, Chevelles or Camaros, and turn them into true monsters. His signature move was to install more powerful, quasi-factory versions of the big block, not the standard 396, but the very ones GM kept under lock and key, or at least their racing modifications. Yenko didn't just tune, he created entire series of cars known as Yenko Supercars, YSC, which were essentially race-prepped machines sold officially through a dealer network. It was a genuine factory race car, certified by a dealer, not by Detroit. The guys at Baldwin Motion did the same. In New York, Joel Baldwin, the dealership owner, joined forces with Joel Rosen, the owner of the tuning shop Motion Performance. Their approach was even more radical. They offered customers not just modifications, but packages that transformed ordinary Chevrolets into true street racing machines. By their claims, some of their creations could run the quarter mile in under 11.5 seconds, which was simply phenomenal for a road car of that era. They installed massive 427 or even 454 cubic inch big blocks, reworked transmissions, suspensions, everything to push the car to its absolute performance peak. These cars were so powerful and uncompromising that they sometimes even drew the ire of official GM representatives who tried to stop them, but to no avail. Thus, against the backdrop of GM's formal ban on racing, a unique dealer racing program emerged. It was an unofficial alliance between rebellious engineers within the corporation and daring dealer entrepreneurs who, despite all the risks, carried on the legacy of the mystery engine. They turned road cars into racing legends, proving that the true spirit of speed cannot be silenced by any prohibition. The Big Block 396, with its hidden power, became the perfect canvas for these automotive artists. It wasn't just an engine. It was a symbol of resistance, the banner of a new era where racing had merely changed its stage, moving from shining factory hangars to the dusty, but no less passionate dealer garages. We have traced the path of the mystery engine from its secret birth to its triumph, and then to its apparent demise. We have seen how the spirit of speed, driven underground, found an outlet through daring engineers and rebellious dealers. But now, it is time to face the truth. Was this ban a real defeat, or was it a masterfully played game where GM only pretended to surrender? Let's rewind. The voluntary ban on racing by the Automobile Manufacturers Association in 1957 was, in essence, a gentleman's agreement with numerous loopholes. The auto giants nodded their heads, but continued to fuel the fire of speed. However, by the early 60s, when competitors like Ford and Chrysler began to openly challenge them on the tracks, the situation heated up. It was then, under the cloak of strictest secrecy, in remote hangars where top management never set foot, that Chevrolet engineers feverishly worked on their new monster, that very mystery engine. It was born not of compliance, but of a desperate desire to prove superiority. And when this hidden ace was suddenly unleashed at Daytona in 1963, showcasing its shocking potential, General Motors found itself at a crossroads. On one hand, an undeniable success. On the other, a public violation of the rules, threatening reputational and legal consequences. So, what happened? GM announced a complete and unconditional withdrawal from motorsport, and most of these innovative engines were reportedly destroyed. But this was not a defeat. It was a brilliant demonstration, a theatrical performance for corporate lawyers and an outraged public. And behind the scenes, the show was just beginning. For true passion cannot be suppressed by the stroke of a pen. It merely changes its form. The developments of that mystery engine did not vanish like sand through fingers. No, they became the seeds from which the next giant grew. The Mark IV Big Block, crowned in 1965 when the 396 engine was introduced to the world. And here we see the first, most striking example of this spectacle. The officially stated horsepower for the L78 version was 425, But anyone who knew anything about engines understood that was not true. It was a carefully crafted lie. Rumors suggested that the real power easily exceeded 450 horses, a figure intentionally underrated to avoid unnecessary attention, bypass high insurance premiums, and of course, adhere to that very same fictitious ban. But GM didn't just understate the numbers, it took bolder steps. In that same year, 1965, the Chevelle Z16 SS 396 appeared, a true wolf in sheep's clothing. It was a limited series, essentially a street-legal race car, a production car that you could drive straight from the dealership to the racetrack. It was an unambiguous signal. The ban exists, but it's not for us, and certainly not for those who understand the secret language of Detroit. The unofficial support from Zora Arkus Duntov, his network of influence permeating GM, never ceased for a moment. Those very lost engines and blueprints we talked about confirmed it. The ban only drove true speed enthusiasts underground, but it didn't stop them. And the Big Block 396 became the perfect tool for this. Its robust construction, its immense potential for tuning, its hidden yet palpable power. All of this made it the king of the streets and tracks. It didn't need official factory support because it had something much greater, an indomitable spirit. It was this spirit, combined with engineering genius, that allowed dealerships like Yenko Chevrolet and Baldwin Motion to create their legendary monsters. They took this already formidable engine and turned it into an absolute weapon, capable of tearing up drag strips and dominating road courses. Without GM's official blessing, but with the unspoken confidence that somewhere in Detroit, they were being silently applauded. Thus, the Big Block 396 became more than just an engine. It became a cult. It became a symbol of defiance, a banner of resistance against any prohibitions that sought to suppress the passion for speed. Its roar on the tracks, its victories in drag racing, its place under the hoods of iconic muscle cars. All of this was not a call for factory support, but a hymn to engineering genius and the human thirst for conquest. The stories of the Big Block 396 are stories of how limitations breed innovation, and how bans only strengthen the desire to break the rules. And therein lies its true, unbroken legacy. The story of the Forbidden Engine is not just a saga of metal and speed. It is a profound reflection on the indomitable human passion, on the eternal struggle between the spirit of freedom and the shackles of systems, between open dictate and secret defiance. It shows how even under the heaviest pressure, the true thirst for perfection always finds its way, transforming and resurrecting itself, only becoming craftier and stronger. Can anything truly die if its ideas live on, if the spirit that created it has merely learned to be more cunning? Or are all prohibitions just catalysts for a new, even bolder form of rebellion? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. And of course, support us with a like if this story resonated with you.